Okay, good to know. All right, welcome to our monthly meeting, everyone. It's summer, beginning of hurricane season, but let's keep our fingers crossed and hope that they don't head our way. Um, so we have a few special announcements to make. Let me get right into those. The June kite was sent out. You probably got an email letting you know if you are a subscriber to the kite. Some of the articles in the kite, the plant of the month is Rattlesnake Master. And I don't know why it has that name. I should look that up. I am curious now. I forgot to. I'm sure it's in the article. I just didn't get a chance to read it yet. The featured speaker, of course, is Paul Davis. You'll hear all about him from me anyway. The bird of the month is going to be the American Dipper. So exciting, one of my favorite birds. I've seen it twice in my life, and they were both wonderful times. President's Corner article is there that I write every month now. And we are hoping that you'll all get involved in the 12th Palm Beach County June Challenge. The June Challenge starts today because it's June 1st. And basically every species, you count species that you see for the month of June, it goes on a list, and then you send that list in. And all the information, if you go to the kite, you'll see all the information on how to do that. And Paula Guttrell, who's actually on the meeting, and Vicki Rogerson, their numbers are there, and you can call them if you have any questions. And if you're interested, Vicki Rogerson will also post your numbers as well, so we can see how people did in the county. And so you can, in a sense, challenge each other. But it's really a challenge for yourself, and it's an honor system type of birding activity. So get involved in the June Challenge. Give yourself a reason to get out there in June. I know it's getting hot, but if you have a reason to get out there, it's not so bad. And you might just have a great time doing it. There's also how to be part of the photography group article. And if you want to be part of the photography group, Friends of Audubon Everglades renewal membership renewal no, there was supposed to be another slide with the photography, and I don't know why it didn't come up. Anyway, the photography group, if you want to be part of that, and there's an article about how to do that, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in just a minute. We are in our Friends of Audubon Everglades membership renewal drive. If you need any assistance on joining or renewing your membership, please contact membership@audubon-everglades.org. It's very simple to remember or write it down. Also, if you go to the website and you just want to go ahead and join, you can just click on the tab on the left where it says join, and you'll be taken to the page, and you can renew your membership or join as a new member there. So we look forward to having you as a friend of Audubon Everglades. Some other news and special announcements. The Audubon Photography Group, the first critique, this is the last meeting for the year until September. Our critique session, we have a critique session and an internal group photo share and summer discussion. If you're a friend of Audubon Everglades, you can be part of that. And we will be sending out information on that to all the friends of Audubon Everglades. So again, one of the new privileges of being a friend of Audubon Everglades is being automatically part of the photography group. There is no extra fee. There's no special dues. You are automatically part of it. And if you want to submit images for critique and get more information on a more regular basis, please register at the address that I just shown you. AEPG register at audubon-everglades.org.
I'll put it in the chat.
And Mary's will be putting that in the chat so that you can have that there as well, and you can just copy and paste it onto your computer. Our next AE Zoom meeting will be on July 6th. Our presenter will be Ryan Davis, a biologist from Rising Tides Explorers. He's the owner of that company, and it will be on the magnificent mangroves, its importance in our environment. And I also am going to announce our August presentation because it's so special. I'm so excited about it. Benji Stute of who's the Public Outreach Program Supervisor, and his Days Edge film crew will be presenting their award 20-minute film, Hidden Wild. It follows 3 young students as they traipse through the Loxahatchee River area. And it's wonderful. You're going to love this film. It's winning all kinds of awards. And so there'll be an introduction to the film by Benji. There'll be a screening of the film. And then afterwards, there'll be a Q&A, not only with Benji, but with a number of members of the film crew as well. So it's going to be a very special evening, something we haven't done before, and it should be very, very exciting. One thing I did want to mention before I go on to the next slide, and I don't have a slide for it, is that there is a leased tern, a nesting area on Pompano Beach, and it is being stewarded by incredible, capable, hardworking stewards, I think at least 7 of which are from Audubon Everglades. And if you would like to volunteer for that group, Paula Gatrell, who's one of the stewards, is going to be putting the phone number to call and volunteer into the chat. They need more stewards. They're struggling to both deal with feral cats, with an overzealous public and sometimes photographers. And so the more stewards there are to help and manage the influx of both people and feral cats, the better the success for survival of these incredibly incredible birds. So please volunteer if you can and have the time. And Paul is posting that into the chat right now. Another special announcement we have is Audubon Everglades has been partnering with Pine Jog Environmental Education Center on a native plant demonstration educational garden. And this is specifically geared towards teachers from all over the county who will be given workshops on native plants for their schools. So they'll be able to come here, see what a native garden looks like, get ideas, and then take these ideas back to their school and be able to plant them at their school. So this past Saturday, we completed our planting there. And so they're all very young plants now, but I'm going to show you some pictures from the day of some of the hardworking Audubon Everglades members who are there. So here is Lauren Butcher. She is an AE board member and our project lead. She's been really the person behind this project. She applied for a $4,000 grant and we got that money to put in these plants. And she's been working so hard overtime on this project, and we just cannot thank her enough. Also joining her that day was AE board member Natasha Warich, who's a wildlife biologist. You see her with a full shovel of dirt there, ready to put in some plants. We put in over 100 plants easily on that day. Here's AE volunteer Blue Kaufman, who recently read a book discussion group, and she's also about to put in a plant there. She was part of our second shift that came in after the first shift was exhausted and said, okay, we've had enough. And then we had a second shift come in. And so she worked tirelessly until we all left at about 4 o'clock that day. Here is Palm Beach Pan's garden director, Sue Lerner, who was instrumental in supervising the planting, the selection of plants, the layout of the garden. And we cannot thank Sue Lerner enough. If you go to Pan's Garden in Palm Beach and you see Sue there, she's almost always there, be sure to say hello and be sure to thank her for her contribution to the Pine Jog Environmental Center education garden that we've put in. And here's me with a shovel. This was such hard dirt. It was like rocks, but I persevered. I think I dug about 10 holes before my shoulders gave out. But and then when I couldn't dig in this area anymore, I called my son, and you can see the muscles on him. And he came in, and he must have put in 30 holes in the next hour and a half. So it's always good to have a young, strong son, and it was great of him to come out and help as well. And I thank you, Jake. Okay. So birding field trips, we are beginning to plan for the 2021-22 season, and we should have some exciting and unusual field trips this year. We're trying to reach out and do different kinds of trips as well. and we think you're going to really be excited by them. We are still always looking for volunteers. I'm just focusing here on tech support in any way, whether it's when we go back into meetings, tech support, we're definitely going to need that. We're probably looking at going back if things go well, if the COVID climate allows us to, probably sometime back in late fall, early winter, maybe for the December meeting. I think until then, we're going to stay Zoom. And then we could also use, we'd love to have an Everglades Kite newsletter assistant. We could always use the help there in terms of getting it out on time, being sure it's laid out properly, being sure the articles are posted correctly. So if you'd love to be involved in the kite, we'd love to have you. So please, please, please. And if you want to volunteer in any other way, just contact me and I will forward your information to, to Chris Golia, who is on the call, who is on the meeting tonight also. And she will get back to you and we'll try to find a place that fits for you. On the conservation front, as far as we know, Governor Santos has still not signed the SB 100 repeal MCORS bill, even though it was unanimously voted in by all of the legislators. It will repeal one of the 3 corridors, the Southwest Central Florida corridor, which perhaps is the worst because that's panther habitat. And so at least 1/3 of the 3 projects has been repealed, and there are groups still working on repealing the other 2. So we'll see where that goes. But if you can, please give Governor DeSantis a call and just let him know nicely that you'd love him to repeal this, to support his legislators who all supported this bill. Okay, if you have any questions tonight, whether they're for Clive with the Bird of the Month or Paul Davis when he does his presentation on the plastic problem, please put your questions in the chat tab at the bottom of your screen. And that way it'll be able to be seen by all the participants and we'll be able to answer them in a timely manner.
Can you go back to that previous slide for 1 minute with the
sure.
governor?
Of course.
I wasn't quick enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, got it.
Got it. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so now we're up to our first exciting presentation of the evening. One of my favorite birds. It's going to be Clive and Cece Pinnock on the Bird of the Month. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Clive, and you can start sharing yours.
Okay, and hopefully this will go nice and smoothly this time. How's that? Very good. All right. Well, we want to continue with our monthly series and by focusing on North American species requested by our Audubon Everglades members. Each month, information on the featured species will cover its description, range, habitat, food, and reproduction. And this month, we are excited to present to you, not the Swainson's hawk, but the American dipper, which was requested by Peyton White. And thank you so much, Peyton. This particular bird, like Scott says, is actually one of my favorites. And I saw it when I was still working with the National Park Service in Denver, Colorado. I was out with several other biologists going through one of the natural areas there. And we were literally crossing a stream on a bridge, and there was the bird doing its dipping on the rocks down below us. So absolutely beautiful bird. This bird measures about 7.5 inches from tip of beak to tip of tail. It's a chunky little bird, sooty gray in color, and both male and female adult birds look identical. The difference in them, however, is seen with the juvenile bird. It's actually lighter in color with a lighter colored beak, and there's some mottled patterning on the breast area compared to that of the adult. These birds inhabit streams in the mountainous the mountainous northwestern region of the United States, also into Canada and Alaska. There is also a smaller population that extends into Central America and into Mexico as well. You can see from our range map here the full range of the resident population that we have here in North America. There are actually 5 species worldwide, but only 1 here in North America. The birds actually do inhabit, as I mentioned before, mountainous streams. They will hang out in creeks as well. And generally the waters that they inhabit are usually very cold, very clear, but also very clean, unpolluted waters. And we're gonna touch on that a little bit more, just a minute or so more in the presentation. But you can see there from the photographs, these birds inhabit very picturesque locations. As I mentioned before, very mountainous areas, but they've also been found in areas in streams flowing through desert regions, as well as in coastal Alaska, and some locations even at sea level. In regards to their foraging activity, they use a combination of different strategies. You can see in the upper left, one of the techniques that the birds will use is to walk along the rocks midstream, poking their heads beneath the surface of the water, looking for their favorite prey, which are aquatic insects, both the adults and the larval forms. Another foraging strategy is to actually dive beneath the surface of the water, and using their wings to propel themselves forward, they will actually swim, searching the sediment and rocks below the surface for these aquatic insect larvae. They actually will use their claws to crawl along the bottom as well. And they will use that little beak of theirs to flip over small pebbles, rocks, larger stones if they can, and sunken sticks, leaf litter to forage for the insects. Their diet, interestingly enough, is also made up of fish eggs, some worms, snails, and even small fish, generally less than about 3 inches in size. The bottom left photograph shows you one of the dippers quite proudly showing his little fish that he caught. And what is more typical is the photograph on the lower right with these guys catching mayflies, caddisflies, beetle larvae, beetles. They will occasionally leap in the air and catch insects mid-flight, but typically their foraging practice is to either dunk their heads beneath the surface of the water, or will actually plunge in the water to go after prey that way. Generally, as the birds are moving from one location to the next, they will also follow the stream along its course, as opposed to flying over land to create a shortcut to another location. So they typically will use the route that the stream is actually following to locate prey. During the breeding season, the males will actually get on a particular habitat. They will do a lot of singing. These guys are actually known as North America's only aquatic songbird, and their voices are so loud that it actually exceeds the roaring of the water that's usually within the area that the birds are foraging in. Once courtship ensues, the male and female will establish or cement that pair bond by copulating, and then they will set about locating a nest site, typically on ledges or in dirt banks, or one of the most interesting places lately due to human activity is they've incorporated bridges that go over streams, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But you can see there in the photo on the upper right that generally they use these ledges. The nest is usually be about 8 to 10, maybe 12 inches in diameter, with an entrance hole at the lower end of it. Most of the exterior of the nest is covered with live moss, and that moss works to absorb quite a bit of the spray that usually is nearby where the nest is located. They also will place their nests behind waterfalls as well. And generally, there's considerable effort in nest location so that the nest is protected not only from flooding, but also potential predators that might try to get to the nest, feeding on the young as well as the eggs. Generally, the average number of eggs are 4 to 5. The female incubates those eggs by herself for about 13 to 17 days. Once the eggs hatch and the young are quite helpless and naked with very little down on them, the male then becomes active in assisting with caring for the young along with the female. The young fledge from the nest about 18 to 25 days after hatching. And believe it or not, they are able to dive and swim almost immediately after fledging the nest. Parents still do dive and get food for them until they're able to appropriately feed themselves. I'm going to read a little bit of information here I thought really interesting in regards to the conservation of the species. The population has actually declined or disappeared in some former haunts where streams have become polluted. The species is then a good indicator of water quality. Though American dipper populations are difficult to count, numbers appear to be relatively stable, though experienced a small decline from 1966 to 2014, according to the North American Breeding Bird Survey. Partners in Flight, which is another agency that monitors avian populations, estimates a global breeding population of 190,000, with 86% living in the United States, 8% in Canada, and 5% in Mexico. Now, referring to what I mentioned before about bridge usage, bridge building during road construction has created nesting locations that dippers seem to readily take to. However, dam construction floods dipper habitat, and land uses such as logging, mining, and agriculture can affect water quality and reduce the availability of aquatic insect prey. Dippers are also susceptible to pollution in waters, including organic pollutants such as PCBs and heavy metals. To wrap this up, some really interesting facts about the dipper. American dippers choose a nest site invariably along a stream that provides security from floods and predators. Availability of suitable nest sites appears to be a limiting factor for the population. To be able to survive in cold waters during the winter, the American dipper has a low metabolic rate, extra oxygen carrying capacity in its blood, and a thick coat of feathers. Now, unlike most songbirds, but similar to ducks, the American dipper molts its wing and tail feathers all at once in the late summer. The bird, of course, then is flightless during that time. And finally, the oldest American dipper was over 8 years old when it was recaptured and re-released during a banding operation in South Dakota. And so that is our presentation on the American Dipper. Again, thank you so much for Peyton for suggesting it. I suspect any of us that have traveled to our Western states have possibly seen this bird. And if you haven't, look for it the next time you go. Absolutely amazing little bird. Scott, we're ready to field any questions you may have.
Okay, and Peyton, thank you for suggesting it also. Peyton is with us from her new home in Texas. And I'm so glad that you could enjoy this presentation by Clive. So if you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat so that we can all see and ask. So far, I see no questions yet.
I must have done a very good job.
Well, we'll see.
Or everybody fell asleep.
I have a, no, not with the American Dipper. So we do have a thanks, Clive, from Holly Cray.
Thank you, Holly.
So far, I see no other questions. Okay. Well, oh, wait. We're getting a live bird suggestion. I will share this with you because I know you like to keep these a little secret. Thank you, Ria, and I will share your suggestion with Clive. And Fred is thanking Peyton for suggesting the topic. I love it. I love it. Thank you. Okay. Well, if we have no more questions, thank you, Clive. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Your presentation was so complete that it didn't evoke any questions today. I kind of do have one question. I don't know if you can answer because it's probably, I don't know if it is answerable. You know, with climate change, you know, affecting our waters, you know, across America, and this bird being such a dependent on a water habitat and water levels changing. I know areas are drying up. Do you have any thoughts on that in terms of how it might affect this bird?
I am sure it is to a great extent is having a negative impact on the bird, depending on the location. They seem to be extremely sensitive to very clean water, but of course, because they are completely dependent on these rushing streams and rivers, areas in which these water sources are drying up will obviously have a direct and adverse impact on the population. So that is certainly something that scientists will be paying very, very close attention to. I'm sure they are already monitoring this species in regards to these dilemmas, and hopefully there will be some sort of resolution. How or what, I don't know. One of the things that I do know as an avid student of nature is that the components of nature are quite adaptable, and left to their own devices long enough, quite often these animals will readjust to what's taking place in their environment. So we can only hope.
Well, thank you, Clive. Thanks for that insight into my question. I really do appreciate that. So we have no other questions. We are going to move on. Clive, if you could stop sharing your screen, please. Thank you very much. And I will share mine. There we go. Okay, I am having trouble sharing my screen. Rich, I think you may need to make me a co-host again. I've lost my co-host privilege. And I definitely need to share my screen tonight.
You should have it now.
Okay, thank you, Rich. I see it. Thank you very much. One of the things that can go wrong with Zoom, but most of the time we're doing pretty well. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't supposed to go to that slide. I totally apologize again. Things that can go wrong. Okay, so our featured program speaker tonight is Paul Davis, a A conservation biologist, Paul has been an integral part of Audubon Everglades for years as our sanctuary chair and now as well as our current science advisory committee chair. His advice to AE and me in particular on conservation related issues has been invaluable. He has helped us formulate our response to county and municipal restoration or rezoning projects, often meeting with municipalities or foundations on behalf of AE and offering them suggestions on how to move forward with a particular project. He has also provided the AE Board of Directors invaluable service and advice regarding our Lapham property. My wife, Mary Young, and I are indebted to Paul for helping us get the AE Conservation Stewardship Training course off the ground in 2016, for being one of our regular instructors since that time, and for helping us put together our Plastic Marine Debris Symposium in 2017, which he also presented at. Professionally, Paul spent 25 years of his career working for Palm Beach County Department of Environmental Resources Management, better known as ERM, and retired as their Director of Coastal Restoration, not Resurrection, which I almost said. During that time, he's been involved in ecosystem and protected species initiatives and the management of reef, beach, dune, mangrove, seagrass, and estuarine communities. Since his retirement, when he is not surfing, paddleboarding, kayaking, or playing the ukulele in a group that performs in senior facilities, he has been working with Clearwater Marine Aquarium Research Institute as a conservation biologist and manages their Healthy Habitats and Ocean Marine Debris Environmental Education Program in Southeast Florida. The program focuses on marine debris issues and uses a mobile classroom like Miss Frizzle's Magic School Bus to bring the message to schools and community events. He also coordinates monthly beach cleanups at Boynton Inlet to raise awareness and monitors rooftop least term colonies. Oh, in addition, he coordinates the annual winter shorebird survey in Palm Beach County and is an expert at identifying shorebirds, as Natasha Warwick has told me. Did I say that Paul was retired? I first met Paul on my first Christmas bird count when we were assigned to the same team. I was still a relative beginning birder back then and remember misidentifying, I cringe to say it, the song of the Northern Cardinal, which Paul gently corrected me on and identified. It is my honor to know and work with someone like Paul for these past years since my involvement in AE, and it is my pleasure to be able to introduce him to you tonight. So please put your hands together in your living rooms, dining rooms, or wherever you are viewing this for Paul Davis as he presents on our plastic problem.
So Scott, I have to say some of that information is accurate, but I'm not sure about all of it.
What did I get wrong?
Yeah, well, we won't go into that.
Okay.
Right, the expertise part, I think, is the part that I truly don't consider myself to be an expert birder in anything. So,
well, Natasha very, very keenly pointed out to me that when she was working under you, that if you were very upset with them if they got a shorebird incorrect. And she said you never got them incorrect. So I take that as being an expert.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. So I'm going to share your screen right now, Paul, and you'll alert me when to advance the slides.
Okay. And I'm going to turn my video off so that I don't use up too much bandwidth.
Okay.
Okay. So thanks for inviting me tonight. I really appreciate it. I think we're going to talk about this wonderful material known as plastics. It's made from petrochemicals. It's responsible for many of our technological advances. It's cheap, it's lightweight, it's strong, it's flexible. It can be formed into a variety of shapes, sizes, and colors. It's really durable, lasts many, many years, which is a good thing and also can be a bad thing. So what we're going to talk about tonight is kind of, we've got too much of a good thing. And just to back up a little bit, why is it how can I be working for Clearwater Marine Aquarium yet over here in Palm Beach County? I was working with a group called Sea to Shore Alliance. We merged with Clearwater Marine Aquarium, and so we still have a presence here on the southeast coast, primarily when it comes to working with manatees and marine debris. So that's kind of who I am. Oh, one other bit. Clearwater Marine Aquarium is famous for the couple of dolphins known as Winter and Hope. And there was a movie made about their experiences with marine debris. The movies were called Dolphin Tale 1 and 2. So if you'd like to learn more, check out those movies. Okay, next one. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of plastic. We're going to look at it from kind of my perspective, which is, marine centric. Where does it come from? How long does it last? How does it move around? What are its impacts? And what is it that we at, I'll use that acronym CMARI or CMARI, which is our research institute. What is it that we are doing about it? And we'll talk a little bit, hopefully, about some of the potential solutions. Next. So this is it's interesting that I've been around as long as plastic. I don't think I'm nearly as durable as plastic, but it started to be used with some frequency beginning in the 50s. It's now virtually found everywhere. Everywhere scientists are looking for it or sampling for it, whether it's in the water, in the land, the air, our food, they're finding it. Back in the day, and this kind of little illustration off to the right of the slide is dating me, but I imagine quite a few others understand where this came from. This is a scene from The Graduate, where Benjamin was being advised that he needs to get into the plastics industry. But it's been around that only for basically a generation. So the world is just getting used to dealing with this new substance, this alien substance. In my 40, 50 years of kind of dealing with this issue, it's getting exponentially worse. Part of that has to do with plastic being so durable that hasn't had enough time for it to disappear or degrade. So basically what it does is it turns from a large piece of plastic into a small piece of plastic, typically through the processes of wind, wave, and solar activity that kind of breaks it down it makes it more and more brittle and breaks it up into small pieces. In the last decade or so, there's been a groundswell of awareness of this issue, but only recently has there been significant research begun on what those impacts are. So we're aware, that's a good thing. Research is starting to be conducted. That's a better thing. But the future is looking a bit bleak. There are projections for massive increases in the amount of plastics that are being produced. Part of that has to do with how well we've done in reducing our dependence upon petroleum products. Our cars are more fuel efficient. We're using less petroleum products in general. So the petroleum industry needs to find an alternative market for this raw material, petroleum. And so what they're projecting is there's going to be a massive amount of plastics generated, even more than we've seen today. In my experience, we've realized we can't clean our way out of it. We do a beach cleanup, but it comes right back the next tidal cycle. We can't recycle our way out of this. And kind of the direction we need to go is to reduce the amount of single-use plastics we utilize. Next slide, please. So this is a graph of my lifetime. So born roughly 1950, and the red dots indicate roughly, it's a little bit dated, but we at this point, about 300 million tons of plastics are being generated per year. And the projection, as you can see, is kind of off the chart. The primary producers are China, the EU, North America, and Asia. But that's that's not necessarily the only way to look at those numbers. If you look on the right-hand side, if you take the amount of plastic that's being generated divided by the number of people, the United States and the EU are the top generators per capita of plastics. So it has to do with our we're very wealthy countries, and we consume a lot of plastic. So while you may hear in the media that this is a China problem or an East Asian problem, this is a global problem, and our economy is driving that bus. Go ahead, next slide. This slide is a bit out of date, but the numbers are still relatively accurate. Recycling is not the way to go. I'm sorry, recycling is a partial solution, but it's not the only solution. I think that many of us have felt that, well, I'm doing my part. Maybe I buy plastic, but once I'm done with it, I pitch it into my little blue bin, and off it goes. But in fact, even in the best of times, here in the U.S., typically we've only recycled about 6% of the plastic that we consume. Next slide. And in 2017, things got considerably worse. What happened is China decided that rather than accepting plastics from other countries for their own purposes of recycling and then reselling it back to us, it became economically infeasible for them to continue with that. And part of the reason for that is that plastics are, there are many different types of plastics. Many of the products that are created today have multiple types of plastic, included in the same item. And it takes very different technologies to separate those plastics out. So China said, okay, that's it. We're tired of accepting all of this plastic. And they just said, we're done. So, as of 2018, the US and the rest of the developed world had to look for places to recycle their plastic. Prior to that, about 50% of our plastic waste went offshore. So now where is that going? Well, some of it is not going anywhere. Many towns, municipalities across the country have stopped their plastic recycling programs because it's no longer economically viable. Others have attempted to find markets in other countries, such as Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia. But many times those countries are not able to handle that increased volume and just don't have the technology to appropriately do it. So essentially we are, the developing world is kind of exporting the problem to the less developed world. However, that might be an opportunity, now that we have these massive amounts of plastic kind of building up in supply. There may be that may force a change in some fashion. Maybe that'll be we use less plastic. Maybe there'll be a new way to recycle plastic better. Who knows? But that was a dramatic step that China took. Next slide. Like I said, my focus is on the marine environment, and we look at marine debris. Basically, marine debris is anything that's been produced by humans that ends up in a waterway. Now that could be the ocean, it could be the Lake Worth Lagoon, it could be a river, a canal, a lake, it could be the Great Lakes. But basically, if it's in the water, it is now marine debris in some form or another. And the sources are us. 80% of that marine debris comes from the land. Much of it has to do with and at least in this country, litter is less of a problem. It is still a problem, much less than it used to be, back in the 60s, 70s. But it's much less of a problem than it was, but we still do not have good waste management practices. if you've ever followed a SWA truck down the road, you'll usually see, waste, plastics or other things kind of, flying out the back of those trucks sometimes. Anytime it rains, the water entrains debris, from the roadways that ends up in the stormwater systems, which ends up in the lakes, which ends up in the oceans. The lower right-hand picture is an example of another primary source, and that's the natural disasters. That was from the tsunami that hit Japan, the earthquake and tsunami that hit Japan. Much of that debris a few years later ended up washing ashore in Washington State and Oregon after crossing the Pacific. Next slide. The other primary source of marine debris is, as you would expect, ocean sources, which includes fishing vessels, oil and gas production, cruise ships, aquaculture installations. In this area, we were always concerned about cruise ships. They have actually improved their handling of waste over the years. Again, I'm talking about from what it used to be like in the 70s and 80s, but it's still not good enough. I mean, there's still many instances of cruise ships being fined for improper dumping. And luckily, now that everybody has a camera, they can document those occurrences much more readily. So I think that we see much less of that activity. Next. So how long does it persist in the ocean? Well, it depends on the type of plastic that it is. Generally the thinner stuff like plastic bags will break down in a few decades. But some of the more resistant materials, such as plastic bottles and fishing gear, can take hundreds and hundreds of years to persist. And many times people believe that whatever is on the surface is what you see, but the vast majority, and there's a great graphic out there that it's basically like an iceberg. The material that we see on the beaches and on the surface of the water is very small comparison to what is suspended in the water column, or now layering some of the deeper parts of the oceans. So kind of looking at this slide again, so it persists for hundreds of years. The Earth's habitats, ecosystems have never seen this material before in this form, and it's just not broken down biologically yet. Or perhaps some sort of organism will evolve to be able to do that, but we're not at that point yet. Next. So here's how it moves around our oceans. In each ocean basin, there's what's called a gyre, which is a combination of the wind and currents are kind of driving the flow of materials around these oceans. In the North Atlantic, in the northern hemispheres, that rotation, those gyres rotate in a clockwise motion, and in the southern hemisphere, those gyres rotate counterclockwise. If you look closely, you'll see that all those little dots, which are clusters of trash. You hear in the media a lot of talk about the Great Garbage Patch in the Eastern Pacific. Well, and that's over towards Hawaii area. But if you look more closely, you'll see that there's a couple of garbage patches in the North Pacific, and in each of the basins, there's at least one garbage patch. We have our very own, about 1,000 miles offshore in the Sargasso Sea here in the North Atlantic. Click the next button, please. I should have done that a while ago. That's where we are. Go ahead, next. Zooming in a little bit, this is the Gulf Stream, which we consider to be a conveyor belt. It's bringing everything in the North Atlantic Basin here to beautiful Palm Beach County. And that's because we live so close to the Gulf Stream Many times whenever the winds start to blow out of the east, we see large windrows of sargasso seaweed, which is what you see there in the bottom photo. But along with that seaweed is larval fish, invertebrates. Many times sea turtles, spend a lot of time in that important habitat, but also entrained in that conveyor belt is plastics. So it's great to live here. We get huge amounts of drift items deposited. We have some unusual sea beans that end up here. We also, because of kind of everything sort of congregating here, we have very high species diversity. But along with that comes huge amounts of trash, much more than most other parts of Florida. Next. So this is what we find in our typical beach cleanup. We, if you kind of follow around from the right to the left, little bits of plastic are our primary item. And in the lower right corner is a bucket full of just little bits of plastic. Again, as I mentioned, big pieces of plastic turn to little pieces of plastic due to physical forces. And those little pieces of plastic turn into what I call beach confetti, but it's also known as also bite-sized pieces of plastic that is easily ingested by birds, by turtles, by fish, by plankton, anything. So that's the vast majority of what we get here in Boynton. Second is cigarette butts, then bottle caps without the bottles, which is interesting. And then food wrappers and straws are kind of our top 5. What's kind of surprising is you hear a lot of talk about grocery bags, balloons, 6-pack holders, medical waste. That we don't find very much of that at all on our particular beach. Again, it has to do with the currents and kind of who utilizes our beaches as well. Next. So why do we worry about it? Well, for a couple of reasons. From a marine mammal point of view, it's a primary source of entanglement. Fishing gear is one of the primary threats to right whales. I think I probably failed to mention that Clearwater Marine Aquarium Research Institute works primarily with right whales in the Southeast United States. Our crews do aerial surveys throughout the winter months to observe the moms and their calves before they move back up north in the summertime. So our staff are able to see these entangled whales, and in some cases we're able to guide rescue efforts, rescue crews to be able to attempt to remove some of that gear. So try and imagine this. You have a couple of people in a small inflatable pulling up to a whale that is a couple of times larger than that inflatable, and you have a knife and a long stick, and you're trying to cut away the line from the end of a whale that does not want you anywhere near it. So, but that's kind of what some of these people do. So entanglement is, like I said, one of the primary problems with marine mammals. About 80% of the right whales have signs of entanglement. Also, we work with the dolphins and manatees, and they're also easily entangled. And partly it has to do with kind of the habitats that they frequent, their curiosity and their flukes. They're able to easily get entangled in this gear. The other problem is ingestion or just eating. Many animals will intentionally seek out these, brightly colored items that are the right size and shape and color to make them think that it's perhaps a prey item. Others will ingest it accidentally. Of course, ingesting a bunch of plastic, trying to digest plastic you're not going to get very far. So many of these animals suffer from malnutrition or impaction of their guts. Next. More reasons to be concerned. Marine debris can serve as a transport mechanism for invasive species moving from one continent or island to another. So that the more things we have floating in the water, the more persistent they are, the more invasive species problems we're going to have and are having. And then of course, just simply massive amounts of debris can affect different habitats, whether it's a beach, a river, or a coral reef system. Next slide. So if you didn't worry about marine debris because of impacts to wildlife, maybe this one will get your attention. So plastic is able to absorb various toxic chemicals from the surrounding environment. And in many cases, they have found that that there is 100,000 to 1,000,000 times higher the concentration than in the surrounding water on these plastic bits. That essentially turns it into a poison pill. If you look in the diagram to the right, you see all the little bits that are being consumed by the plankton, and then the smaller fish, and then by the larger fish, and then by the fish that we eat, the tuna, the mahi, the swordfish. There's increasing amounts of these chemicals being concentrated, as you move up the food web, and we are at the top of that web. Next. So some, numbers that are kind of depressing. Nearly 2,500 species impacted to date. Of course, that's all these numbers are going to be going up as more research is being done. When I first started in doing sea turtle conservation in the early 80s, it was very rare for us to find any sea turtles that had plastics either entangled around the turtle or in its gut. Now it's rare that you don't find that. Almost every turtle, 86% of turtles that are washed ashore, have some sign of plastics, marine debris. Cetaceans, terrible numbers, 100,000 marine mammals per year, and then seabirds, 1,000,000 birds per year. Next. So our program, the H2O program, was launched by our previous iteration was Sea to Shorelines. We were a group of about 10 to 15 scientists doing work on whales, manatees, and turtles. So rather than documenting and trying to work with the rescue folks, it was decided that we needed to do something more proactive and start trying to solve the problem at the front end rather than at the back end. So we do that primarily through what we call the Magic Bus, which is a converted church bus. We use that as a mobile classroom to promote stewardship of the environment. And the ultimate goal was that we were trying to foster change by showing a lot of graphic pictures and showing a lot of bad news. We're trying to get people to become outraged and change their behaviors. Next slide, please. The other thing we used was that we do use is beach cleanups at Boynton Inlet. We were shut down through the COVID year, but we've recently resumed our monthly cleanups every third Saturday at the inlet. And the reason we select that inlet in particular is not only does Palm Beach County have a lot of marine debris, but this inlet collects even more because of its configuration. The hooks on the jetty structures are very efficient at trapping debris, particularly on the north side of the jetty. Plus we have the Boynton Canal, which is due west of the inlet, which is draining about 1/3 of Palm Beach County's uplands. And then of course we have the Gulf Stream nearby. Next slide. So, so far we've been able to remove nearly 4 tons of debris. And again, that's plastic, that's lightweight plastic for the most part. And we already described kind of what the primary materials are. Next slide. Here's just some of the things that we see on the beach. that kind of reinforces the idea that this is a global issue. So besides the trash that beachgoers are kind of dumping on the beach, we receive the majority of what we receive at Boynton Inlet and in Palm Beach County comes from elsewhere. And in this case, we find things every cleanup from the Caribbean. In the upper right corner, there is a picture of emergency water bags that were used during the relief efforts for the 2010 earthquake. Those are still washing ashore now. We typically find 5 or 6 of them every cleanup. And you can see that one has a hole in it. That triangular hole indicates it was either eaten by a hatchling sea turtle or a triggerfish. The big black thing in the middle there is an octopus pot, and their only place that they're used is off the west coast of Africa. And that big, large disc-shaped thing is a fish attracting device, also from Spain and Africa, washing ashore here. The thing in the lower left corner is about 3 foot by 3 foot. It looks like a big piece of cheese, and it is bales of rubber. And they've been showing up for the last couple of years infrequently. We don't quite know where they come from. There's lots of cool ideas, but all we know is that they're coming from far, far away. Next. Again, those are, those images were just to illustrate that this is a global problem. It is not necessarily a local problem. We go to as many schools as we can. So far, we've been to 40 schools, and that's been very rewarding. Unfortunately, we did that using our magic bus, which now has 400,000 miles on it, and we are at this point reevaluating whether we can keep the thing on the road any longer. It's currently over in Clearwater, and they're trying to figure out if it makes any sense to try to repair it yet again. So we probably aren't going to be doing as much as we have in the past when it comes to that. Next slide. Again, we do a lot of as much outreach as we can. So far, we've reached about 17,000 people. Next slide. So how are we going to solve this? Well, we've already talked about outreach and education. That's the first step. More and more people are aware of the problem. We use cleanups again as a reinforcement mechanism, and kind of what we're trying to do there, besides getting people to get out and sweat and get sandy and kind of get grossed out by how much they see, is we're trying to get them to change their vision. A lot of times people don't even see this debris out on the water, on the ocean, in the beaches. I call it trash blindness. It's something that you don't need. It's just kind of part of the background anymore. But once people are forced to go out there and look at it, pick it up and then think about it, that should change their behaviors. That's the intent, at least. More research is coming. That's a good thing. I expect in the future we'll have a much better idea as to the impacts of this plastic on our health. So far, it's not been definitive, but there's lots of folks out there looking for it, looking for whether or not the plastic's affecting our health. What we need to do is reduce this, stem the tide, reduce this pollutant at its source, and actually we are the source. So remember, every time you open up your wallet, or you go to buy something on Amazon, or you go to purchase something, there's going to be alternatives. So you can either purchase that thing that is triple wrapped in plastic and kind of overpackaged, or you can look for an alternative, hopefully that's not even made from plastic. Regulations have been enacted to some extent. There have been, some states and municipalities and countries have done a pretty good job of enacting some regulations. But if you recall my slide that talked about the small amount of plastic bags or straws or 6-pack rings that we have on our beaches, that is, targeting single types of materials is really not going to solve the problem. It helps, it raises awareness, but it doesn't solve the problem. And the only kind of the true solution is going to be developing what's called a circular economy. Right now, our economy is quite kind of linear. You take raw material, you create something from it, you utilize it, and then it goes to the trash. We're slowly evolving to the point of getting better at recycling, but not good enough. But ultimately, what we need to do is get to the point where plastic is considered a valuable commodity or resource. And we need to be able to get the industry to fund the plastic through its entire life cycle, from manufacturing to transport to use to waste management, and then back again, used as a raw material. So that's called an extended user responsibility, and those concepts are already in place. For example, electronic devices or fluorescent light bulbs. Those are types of things where the producer is responsible for trying to do a better job recovering that item back into the system. That's called an EPR process. So the same thing needs to be enacted for plastics. Next slide. So this is kind of what we leave everybody with, is everybody remembers the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. So we're counting on you to add 2 more R's. The first and most important one is to think twice before you buy that plastic item. Refuse to buy it if you can. Reduce the amount that you buy. Reuse it if you have to buy it. Repurpose it, turn it into something else. And then once you've taken care of all of those, then you can recycle it. But recycling is kind of the lowest priority. Those other things take higher priority. Next. We're not-for-profit. These are all the folks that have helped keep my program running. Thank you very much, everybody. And next. So for more information, you check out these videos that are online. I think this is a manageable problem. I don't think it's a solvable problem. I think it's manageable. I think we can do a much better job than we have. And we're kind of in the early phases of that. We're at the awareness phase and taking our baby steps. There's a great piece of legislation that's making us, it's tremendous. This Break Free from Plastic Act is now making its way through Congress. So we need to get as many legislators on board to support that act. It begins the steps of that circular economy and puts a lot of the onus back onto the plastics industry to do a better job. My contact information is down there. Please contact me if you'd like to get on my mailing list to learn about our next cleanup, which happens to be June 19th. Or if you want to learn about some of our outreach opportunities. And then there's also, don't forget, next Wednesday is World Oceans Day. June 9th, there's going to be a beach cleanup up at Coral Cove Park. That's not organized by my group, but it's organized by the Palm Beach County Parks Department, as well as some other groups. So that's the next beach cleanup that I'm aware of. If you live in the North County, be sure to go up there. That's my favorite beach to be at. And I'll probably be up there as well. So any questions?
Okay, we have some questions in the chat already. If you have other questions for Paul, please place them into the chat, and I'm sure Paul will do his best to answer them. So let me get started with some of the questions that have come in already. This is from Sheila Calderon, a longtime member. I read or saw on an email news just yesterday, and that Singapore has developed an incinerating system that burns at very high heat and does not emit pollution in the air from its smokestacks. Do you know anything more about the successful burning system?
I don't know about that one. I would say that's, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I think that it's impossible to burn something and not emit any pollution. They do it, but there has been great strides made in doing a better job with these waste to energy plants, which actually Palm Beach County has one of the state-of-the-art waste to energy plants here in the county. But I think it's there are a lot of problems with incinerating. You're still utilizing a carbon source. You're contributing to carbon emissions. It helps, but it's not the solution.
This is a question from Rhea Moss, one of the former conservation stewards. What do you do with all the debris that you collect? I think that's what she's asking.
So typically before COVID, we counted everything. We weighed everything that came in. So our typical cleanup was, 120 pounds. We counted, we weighed it, and then we had volunteers who sat there and counted, 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 piece, 4 piece. So that was what we did to be able to get an idea of to characterize what we were getting on our beaches. Since COVID, we did not do that. It just goes into the trash. We also used to collect all of the recycling. Since COVID, we don't do that because we're trying not to double handle the debris.
This is from Jeanette Mitchell, our membership chair. Where can one find more information on volunteering for the Boynton Inlet cleanup, monthly cleanup?
That's right underneath the chat, or it's right there at the bottom of the last slide. Email me, and then I will put you on my email list.
Okay, so that's at pdavis@cmaquarium.org, Jeanette. Sue Revy asks, what is considered the source that is targeted? Most everyone in addition to cell phone is carrying a plastic, in addition to carrying a cell phone, everyone is carrying a plastic water bottle. So what is considered the source that is being targeted?
So the source is us. I mean, we are, we drive the economic engine. Whatever it is we purchase is translates into how much plastic we have to manage. So I think that's the primary thing. The other thing is that we need to convince manufacturers to come up with different types of plastic that it would be more suitable for recycling. I mentioned earlier that we have lots of different types of plastic, making it very difficult to, in fact, recycle it. If they would standardize their process way better than they currently have, it would make the process a lot easier.
A new Audubon Everglades member, Phyllis Strain, asks, did you say the United States was the leader in developing plastic to begin with in the 1950s?
I don't know who. I should know that answer. I don't know which country first developed it. I believe it came from Europe, but I don't know. Sorry.
Sheila Calderon has another question. My daughter purchases from a company that packages their cleaning products in sustainable-based packaging that reduces plastic use by over 80% and saves on shipping emissions too. Produce is under the name of Clean Cult. So I guess she's just letting us know that if we are looking to purchase produce, there's a company called Clean Cult that will save some plastic from going into our environment potentially.
Right. So I'm sorry. And that's just an example of kind of doing a little bit, thinking critically about what it is you were buying and looking for a better alternative. That's what we all need to do.
Okay, the next question comes from Ken Boyd, another conservation steward alumni. The plastic that is recycled, how is it recycled? And can all plastic be recycled if it was economically feasible?
And I don't know how it's recycled. That's kind of chemistry magic. But can all plastics be recycled? I don't believe so. I think that there are some that, well, I mean, we already know that if you if you look on the piece of plastic, it has that little magic number in the chasing arrows logo. Our local waste management company does not accept everything that just because it has that logo on it, because they are not able to, even when in good times, they were not able to economically recycle that material. So I think that it's not that, I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where everything can be recycled for multiple reasons.
Ken also asked, please give date and info for Coral Cove beach cleanup again.
Yep.
We'll try to get some volunteers, he says.
Next Wednesday, I'm sorry, 2 Wednesdays from now, June 9th. I believe it's between 1 and 4 o'clock. And it's going to be both on the ocean and the lagoon side.
Oh, great. Chris Golia, our volunteer chair, says, also the Sea Angels group runs a beach cleanup monthly at Boynton Beach Inlet. I think it's the last Saturday of the month. More info on their Facebook page or just Google them, she says.
Yeah, and they're great. They've been doing it longer than my program has. They've got a lot more people doing it. They're much more much better organized.
Great. Jeannie Mauser, another former steward. Thank you so much. Your program has inspired me to make changes as a consumer. And that's, I think, what you're looking for, Paul. I also do weekly beach cleanups.
Thank you. Thank you.
Haley Jones, another former steward. Thank you for your presentation, Paul. One World Zero Waste in Tequesta is a great store to start your journey on reducing plastic consumption.
Yes, good point. They allow people to bring in their own containers and reuse the containers. They try to allow you to purchase things in larger quantities. So like the old days.
Yeah, that would be great if that were more common in more places. Sue Revy asks, is your research also focused on why people buy cases of plastic water bottles? For why people do not drink tap water? That's a great question.
Yeah, I don't know. I know some of the answers to that question. And actually, so here's one perspective that I hadn't thought of before. I've spoken to some folks from other countries, and they said that the reason, and they were walking around with their water bottles, and I challenged them, to one of our outreach events, and I said, well, the reason we do this is because the country I come from, the water is not safe to drink, and we have to have them in containers, and this is the most convenient way for them to consume water. So they just got into the habit of it. Now it's just a matter of trying to make people realize that there's other ways to consume that water. I try to use some scare tactics and explain to them that they're drinking plastic water, because in fact, many times they have done studies showing that there are plastic particles that are in those water bottles that are coming off the plastic water bottles themselves.
And Sue also wonders, Sue Revy also wonders, so who then deals with what is being manufactured? Is there any controls over that in terms of plastic?
No, I mean, there is a plastics manufacturing lobby and association, but when it comes to a regulatory authority over what they can manufacture, no, there's not.
No, that's a shame. Kay Gates has some advice. I have brought personal and cleaning products from wellearthgoods.com, all plastic free. And yes, I love One World Zero Waste. Take your reusable glass jars. So apparently you can bring your glass jars there and you can fill them with the goods. So that's thank you, Kate, for that information. Paul, I have a question. So, I mean, all the speculative research says that the problem, and you said it yourself, is going to be getting far worse, not any better. And you've seen it in your own experience get far worse during just your course of your lifetime. So what's the prognosis? I mean, where are we gonna go within in the next 10 years?
So I've been dealing with environmental issues for my entire career, and it always seems like an uphill battle. I and my answer depends on what time of the what day of the week it is. If it's Monday or Tuesday, I'm very optimistic. If it's Friday or Saturday, I'm pessimistic. So I think that you know I don't think that we can sustain the direction we've been going. I think more and more people are going to realize that we just can't do this any longer. And I truly believe that and particularly when I deal with the children, they come up with these great ideas as to how to potentially solve some of these problems. And I'm optimistic that some young kid that's in school today is going to come up with a solution. And I just don't know what it's going to be, but I just have to be optimistic. It's early in the week.
So you think science is the answer, that there'll be some, in a sense, magic science pill that will solve some of these solutions?
I think it'll be a combination of science and economic drivers. I mean, it's even if the science is there and you come up with a solution, it has to be economically viable.
Right. Just some possibly some suggestions from you. I know that the pandemic, I know that personally, I used much more plastic because we were ordering everything during the pandemic. And so everything we were getting we were getting in plastic, and we were getting shipments from Amazon. And I'm sure many of those out there with us tonight were probably in the same boat that we are. So did things get worse during the pandemic in terms of plastics, do you think?
Yes, yeah, definitely. There are quite a few studies documenting that and for good reason, that we needed to be sure that we were safe. Now the concern is that the industry will use that to continue to sustain those manufacturing the same products at the same levels when there are alternatives. For example, there were initially during the pandemic, there were places that would not accept your reusable grocery bag. Primarily, this was out in the West Coast. Right. So you would go to a store and you could not bring your own bag in there with you because of those concerns. And then apparently the plastics industry was using that to then overturn some of the plastic bag bans that were in place out on the West Coast. Wow. So yes, there has been much more plastic utilized, but in many cases it was justified. Just a matter of, are there other ways that we can reduce our use in other areas?
Thank you for explaining that. Are there, if you were to say a couple of ways to refuse, because you mentioned that was one of the other R's that we often forget about. What would you say are some of the easiest things we can do to refuse to use plastics?
Well, I mean, the easiest is you go into a store and you you leave with less plastic than you typically would. So you pick up something that is in a cardboard container rather than a plastic container. For example, when I look at eggs in the store, there's a whole variety of eggs that are available to us. For me, the only ones I look at are the ones that are packaged in cardboard, regardless of whether or not they're better for me or not. So I mean that's an easy one. I'm drawing a blank on the rest. You probably have some ideas.
I'm sure everybody out there has their own thoughts on how they can refuse and reduce and even perhaps repurpose. I know that we have cut down on our plastic storage bags, which is, I think, a huge problem.
Yes.
By just literally we're washing them and reusing them again.
Yeah.
Until they're just not usable anymore. So I know that's one thing that we've done personally.
And another solution is going back to waxed paper,
right.
For wrapping things, kind of going back to where we were back in when we were growing up. Wax paper, paper bags. There are also these films made out of beeswax that you can use to preserve your your vegetables and things like that. So rather than putting them into those little Ziploc baggies, it's a nice reusable material that is also rewashable.
There were some other suggestions, and there's actually another couple of questions that came up. Okay, wow, I did not realize all these questions. Why can't you burn the plastic as fuel? Most is made from oil. Do you have an answer for that one?
I think it has to do with just the energy. It is burned as fuel. I mean, it is being used, like I said, in our local waste to energy plant out there on 45th Street. I'm not sure if maybe Fred was meaning that it could be used for fuel for vehicles. I don't know.
I think that's what he was suggesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with just loss of energy when you transfer it from one form to another. But I don't know the answer to that one.
Fred, we're going to make you research that one. Is the work of Four Oceans helping at all?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Definitely. I mean, the Four Oceans is an amazing group, and they're getting out again to kind of to the source to some extent. The source of debris is in many cases undeveloped communities. So they're going out there and they're hiring local folks to do huge cleanups. But again, the focus is on cleaning up, which is tremendous, and raising awareness. But we need to do more than that. But yeah, they're amazing.
And here's a really good question from Sheila Calderon. Are we doing enough to get the environmental organizations to petition the large companies to eliminate the bad packaging products?
Sure. I mean, we can certainly do more of that. But again, we vote best with our wallet. So yes, petitions would help. It raises awareness, makes the companies think twice, perhaps. But they're going to really think twice if we hit them economically.
Here are some suggestions. How about installing an under the sink water filter rather than buying bottled water?
Yeah, sure. Suggestion. And actually, I mean, there's in a previous life, I started off as a microbiologist in a water testing lab, wow. and we would frequently test bottled water, tap water, well water, and we found bottled water many times had significantly higher bacteria counts than tap water. And of course, that doesn't mean that it had less of those other compounds in it, but we were looking only at bacteria, and it made me swear off drinking bottled water.
Wow. Gwen Gertie says, that Hayes says that wax paper is also petroleum based.
Oh, good point.
I did not know that myself. Thank you, Gwen. Susan Revy, where does the research you do go? I guess you mean, yeah.
So in terms of the marine debris program, we're not doing any research. We're collecting on the top of we collect. The research that our research institute collects on right whales, manatees, dolphins, and sea turtles, that goes all to the environmental agencies.
Fred Quinn is coming back with a clarification. I was thinking you can use it to produce electricity. Burning creates heat and use it to produce steam to drive generators. Do you know if it's being used in that way at all?
Yes. Yep. It is. 45th Street and Jog Road. Those big smokestacks are burning our waste. Some of it is plastics when they can't find a market for it.
But that burning, is that generating any electricity? Oh, it
yes.
is. It is. Okay, great.
Yep.
Well, thank you. I'm,
Yep.
I'm glad there's something positive going on at 45th Street.
Yeah, and actually that's a good point. That's a field trip that everybody on this call needs to take. They will lead field trips through their solid waste processing plant, where you could actually see when when you take your garbage out to the curb, where does it go? What do they do with it? What does it smell like?
And that's
Um,
actually one of the field trips that we hope to do this year, kind of do a science birding trip, because they have a birding trail there as well.
Yeah, oh,
So,
sure.
so we hope to do something like that. Thank you for, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I
So,
think that would be great.
we've gone through all the questions, Paul. A lot of great questions, and thank you so much for enlightening us on the plastic problem. I think all of us know a little bit more now about what's going on and maybe what we can do. And thank you so much for joining us tonight and for all the work that you do for Audubon Everglades.
That was a lot of questions, I just want to say.
Well, we have a smart audience. And Rose, by the way, says thank you very much. Rose Love says thank you very much. All right, I'm just going to share my screen and remind you about our next presenter. Oh, I have to eliminate Paul's. Darn it, my mistake. Wait, there we go. Can't get it. Sorry, my computer is being ornery right now. So let me just let you know what it is. I'm really sorry. And we'll see you next month, Tuesday, July 6th at 7 p.m. Our guest speaker will be Ryan Young, a biologist, who will be speaking about the magnificent mangroves, its importance in our environment. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I want to thank our presenters tonight, Clive and Cece, and Paul Davis, for being here with us tonight and enlightening us on the American Dipper and on our plastic problem. And we hope you have a great June. Get out there and do some birding. The June challenge is out there for you to get you a little bit more excited about getting out in this hot weather. And we hope you have a wonderful month until we see you next month. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.
Okay, thank you, Rich.